Hey, I'm Gareth from Park Cameras, and today we're talking about log footage. What is it? What is a picture profile? And what settings are going to give you the best results? Let's start with what is a picture profile. So all cameras will ship with different picture profiles in the camera, and the idea is they're used for different things. So you've got things like standard, vivid, and then you've got different shooting scenarios. So like portrait, landscape, some will have things like food, and just generally things like that. The idea is those different picture profiles will set the best settings for that kind of scenario. So landscape will set the best settings for landscape, portrait for portrait, and so on. So for example, this is the standard picture profile. So it's pretty sort of basic picture profile. It looks pretty good. It's got a standard amount of contrast, standard amount of saturation, and for the most part, it looks pretty good. I'm using the Sony a7R III, and I actually really like the colors and things like that. And I think the standard profile in this camera is actually really nice. This is log footage straight out of camera with nothing done to it. So to look at it, it doesn't look very nice at all. It's got no contrast, it's got no saturation, and you might be thinking, why would I use that? It looks horrible. I definitely don't want to use that. And I totally agree, it doesn't look very good at all, but that's kind of the point. You then take that into post, you add some contrast, you add some saturation, you make some tweaks, and it looks really, really good. But you might be thinking, well, okay, that's great, but now you've basically just brought it back to the standard picture profile, so that seems like a lot of extra work. Why not just use that? Well, I think the easiest way to explain it is this. If you're shooting in the standard picture profile, you're shooting the vivid, or any of the other ones, it's kind of like you're shooting with an Instagram filter placed right on top of your footage. So it's actually baking in things like contrast and saturation and colors and stuff like that right into the footage, and that's permanent. You can't take that off. You can't really change that later. There's a little bit you can do, but not that much. If it's got contrast in there, that's baked in. You can't then change your mind later about the look of the footage. Whereas log footage is super flat. It is a blank canvas for you to apply the look of things to. So you can completely shape the end result. So yeah, you can then take the log footage, you can add the contrast, you add the saturation, and basically bring it back to standard picture profile. Great. But if you decide you want to have a slightly flatter look to things, you can do that. You want to make a slightly more contrasty look to things, you can do that. It also gives you much more room for color grading as well. So if you can apply a teal and orange color grade, you can apply a much heavier color grade, you can go for pretty much anything you like. It gives you so much more room to play around in post. It also means that if you did want to go for a really heavy color grade, that's going to be much easier because you can have a much better starting point to do that. Whereas color grading the standard picture profile, the vivid, or anything like that is a bit more like trying to color grade something that's already been color graded. You don't have as many options, and things can start getting out of control much faster. The other major advantage of shooting in log is dynamic range. Because you don't have that contrast baked in and saturation, things like that, you've got more detail in the shadows and more detail in the highlights. And that's a big deal because you can put that contrast in later, but if you then decide, well, actually I need to bring the shadows up a bit because there's detail in there that I want to be able to see that you can't see right now, you can do it. You can get that detail back. Whereas if you shot in standard or vivid, that's gone. That's completely gone. You may as well have deleted that information because the contrast is baked in. And even if you turn the contrast down, you're not going to recover a lot of that detail. So that's why log footage can give you a major advantage with dynamic range. So with all that said, what settings should you be using? Well, whenever I'm able to, I shoot in log. And that's because I basically don't want to delete parts of my footage because I've baked in that contrast. That's essentially one of the biggest reasons that I do it, is so that I have a super blank canvas which I can apply colors, contrast, saturation to, and get the final look to look how I want it to look. So if you're shooting Sony, you can shoot in S-Log, Fujifilm have F-Log, Panasonic have V-Log, some of the Canon cameras have C-Log, but I hear what you're saying, Gareth, my camera does not have a log profile. This whole endeavor has been pointless. But I totally understand, and no worries, we can sort this out because there are ways of essentially faking it. So there's lots of cameras don't have a log profile, so you can't record in log, but you can kind of create your own log profile. It's basically just a very flat picture profile that you'll create yourself. So you head into the menus of your camera, you find a user-defined picture profile, so user 1, user 2, it doesn't really matter, and then you're going to set some settings. So you can bring sharpening all the way down, you can bring contrast all the way down. Saturation doesn't matter as much because you can affect saturation much more freely in post, but if you want to be safe, just bring that all the way down and you're going to have a pretty horrible looking image now. And that's fine, that's absolutely fine, that's what we want. But just be aware that the first time you look at it, and I remember, because I remember doing this myself, the first time I did it, I was not excited. The picture looked bad, and I was shooting a project, and I shot the whole project like that, and I was not excited when I got home because it didn't look very nice, and I was a bit scared. But that's perfectly normal. So once you've done that, you've got a much flatter image. You're gonna have more detail, more room to play around in post. You can then add the contrast back in, add the saturation in, but it means you can play around with colors. You can change the look of your image more freely than you can when you're just using a standard or vivid or anything like that picture profile. Color grading as well, if it's something you've never tried, is something that can bring your videos from okay or even pretty good to amazing. It can completely transform things and just bring them from kind of semi-pro right up to proper professional looking things. Now, with all that said, obviously there is a time and a place for the standard picture profile. And basically, if you're just gonna film something quickly to put online, or if you're definitely not gonna be color grading when you get home, if you're not fussed about any of that, standard picture profile is fine. There's still a bit of room for changing things in post anyway with that, but generally that will be fine if you're just doing a quick video, or like I say, if you're not fussed about color grading at all, you just want to get something done, that's absolutely fine. But whenever I'm able to, and whenever I definitely have the time, I shoot in log. So I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions about any of that at all, pop it down in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. If you like the video, hit the like button, make sure to subscribe for more content. I'll see you in the next video, and as always, thanks for watching.